Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. Please listen to the other aBlogtoWatch podcast, which is aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we chat about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on Superlative, my guest, again, is Alon Ben Joseph, the owner of Ace Jewelers in Amsterdam, among other related businesses. Alon, welcome back to another aBlogtoWatch podcast.
Thank you, Ariel. Again, it's another honor and pleasure for me to be here. I love you, aBlogtoWatch, a Superlative. I recently wrote an article on my LinkedIn answering all the questions I got about podcasts, why they're so popular, and what are my favorite podcasts. And guess what took the number one spot? It's not my own. It's Superlative. I've been listening for years, and you keep on hitting those home runs. So thank you.
Thank you. That's actually... I'm glad you mentioned about your own because you like watch podcasts so much. Not only do you listen, but you started one.
Correct.
I guess answer people, you sell watches for a living. Why also have a podcast about watches? Maybe there's some obvious answers why, maybe some not so obvious answers. Why was that a good use of your time?
So first and foremost, because I enjoy it. It's therapy. As a watch nerd, I'm a collector. First and foremost, I'm a collector. I'm crazy about watches. So I need an exhaust and a ventilation system for...
An outlet to talk about your interest.
Passion.
Yeah.
So I have different hats on. And it's sometimes very difficult because it's a family business. This is our 50th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Commercial. So I've also started watchbase.com. Because it's a passion project. I like data. There was nothing out there, and still today we're the only ones who are independent and have data collected in an orderly manner, and that is not biased or even manipulated by the brands. Then with Ace, we started very early on YouTubing, social media, live streams. We have the Ace List Live, but it's all very commercial, and you know how it is. Brands want you to say what they want you to say. And that's something that...
What do they want you to say?
Well, you need to stay within the parameters, let's say. So they don't like criticism, and I know you know that. And that's why I love aBlogtoWatch. I keep on saying this over and over in our own media outlets, both on Ace, the Real-Time Show, wherever. aBlogtoWatch is last of the Mohicans. You guys are truly the last independent watch media. You are what you see is what you get. You never sold watches. You've created stuff, but you've never sold it. So aBlogtoWatch is not a retailer. And that's, I guess, the difficulty today, this huge convergence that's going on. Media company became retailers in the watch business, but retailers needed to become media companies. So that being said, with Ace, under the Ace umbrella, I did everything: YouTube, podcasts, live streams, social media, etc. Now, because I couldn't say anything that I wanted, I also started the Amsterdam chapter of Red Bar Crew in the Netherlands. So that's literally as a volunteer, has nothing to do with Ace. It's just an outlet for my passion. And then with Rob Nuds, an old aBlogtoWatch alumnus.
Yep.
So all the roads lead back to aBlogtoWatch. No, but all kidding aside. So Rob Nuts is a good buddy of mine. Used to work for a colleague media outlet of yours. When he was a free agent again, I said, dude, we need to start a podcast. So we started jamming. It's called The Real-Time Show. Again, we emphasize on being independent. So you are our inspirator. You're our mentor. And it started out as passion, just venting. And of course, it has a spillover effect on the Ace business. But we don't plug Ace there. It has nothing to do with Ace. And it obviously creates awareness, right? That's why we do all this media. But first and foremost, it gives me energy because I have a lot on my plate. I have 2 young kids. So something has to give, and that's sleep. Because you're such a night owl, I need to get out of my bed early to catch you, right, on your pace. So you're in the stratosphere, and I'm trying to creep up on the highest level of flying.
So I want to talk about that subject about aBlogtoWatch being kind of the only business of its type right now. You've established that there's a great need for it, that I guess, honest and transparent watch media is both valued and in demand by people that like watches. You yourself are a collector. Yes, you're in the business, but you're a collector. And the story I get from yourself and other collectors like you who care about their hobby is, oh my gosh, this wouldn't be really a hobby that was possible if it wasn't for media that allowed us to understand perspectives and ideas. If it was all highly saccharine, sweet, supportive content about the products, you wouldn't really be able to know very much. You'd have to see it yourself and you'd have this private thing. If it was an open conversation, that's what creates a hobby. But on the other hand, there's just aBlogtoWatch left, meaning there were others and now they are something else or they no longer exist. So for people that don't understand why?
You guys, and I mean by that the watch media, first and foremost, educate. And when you get educated, you want to have a full horizon of data, knowledge, and opinions. That's good and bad. That's up, down. It's subjective. But a true journalist, and I've thought a lot about this. What makes somebody independent? What makes good journalism? Because everything is skewed and colored. You see that also in politics and the coverage of politics, right? And media outlets. But a true journalist will try to give a 360 perspective on anything they write about or create content about. Now, a few things to share examples why I love aBlogtoWatch. And again, I also say to all my peers on the B2B side of things, because a lot of people in the watch industry also consume information, is subscribe to your newsletter, your B2B newsletter about the monthly market insights, which are essays, opinion pieces that are worthy, in my humble opinion, of the Financial Times or the New York Times.
Thank you.
It's that high caliber. And you don't write that out of a commercial perspective. You truly try to educate. So that's on the B2B side. On the B2C side of things, I love the fact that you guys are so transparent about what is editorial and what is sponsored. It's ethical, but especially in Europe or on the brand side of things, they think that's a negative. But it's not a negative. It's a positive because you treat your consumer, the readers, fairly. What you see is what you get. And that's transparency. And I think that's the greatest good today in media, but also in marketing. And that's an ethos we also apply at Ace Jewelers. I mean, be transparent, show the good, the bad, and the ugly. You are what you are. Let the consumers decide what they do with it. Don't manipulate them.
Thank you for that. It's obviously a long conversation to sort of get deep into that. We could spend hours on it. I do want to thank you for plugging the newsletter. It is, for those listening or interested, private. If you want to be on it, I will put you on it, but I do it one person at a time. So you can reach out to aBlogtoWatch in any way through the contact form or find me in some way or another. But that's how you can get onto it. And again, Alon, thank you so much for the compliments on it. I do see it as a service to you guys in the industry.
Exactly. And now, and I'll bounce back the ball to you, Ariel. So why do you do it? Because your time is limited as well. You're a night owl. I know you sacrifice your sleep. You have a family. You have kids. So why the hell would you do a one-by-one email that you manually add emails? So it's about giving back, isn't it, to the community?
Well, if I'm not selling watches, then what is my value? And though I'm not classically trained as an academic, I would say that's closer to what I think we attempt to do. We want to have fun in the process because it's a fun hobby and these are beautiful objects. But approaching the hobby from an academic perspective, where I feel more like I'm curating and explaining art as opposed to trying to get you to buy a commodity or a brand and help people move product. And I don't really care about the fashion cycles. I don't really care about like the fact that brands want to push this right now. I'm like, but you sell this over here that is equally nice. I've always tried to give brands a view into what the consumer is thinking. So in the brand side, I've tried to explain, hey, this is what it's like to buy watches. And then the other side, for consumers, no, I don't try to say this is what it's like to sell or make watches, though there's a lot of that. But it's more of like, where does this stuff come from? How does it get made? What was the person thinking that designed it? What were they trying to do with this? And I think that's poorly told by the brands themselves. So I wouldn't call myself, like I never thought to myself like I am a storyteller, but that's what I'm doing. I'm explaining to different arms of this hobby who don't always talk to one another or share the same culture. I have to be sort of a liaison. So it's sort of a communicator and an academic and a critic and a curator and all these things in one. And these are completely different skill sets. I, from the day one of doing this, have not thought of a good job title for myself. I remember a long time ago as a joke on business cards. I don't remember last time I gave out a business card. I just wrote, you know what I wrote? I wrote Master Watch Handler.
Well said. And you're doing a darn good job at it, because I'm looking behind you and I see a G-Shock book, and that reminds me another thing why I love aBlogtoWatch. You guys are maybe the only ones, and I've always been. I spoke about the whole spectrum of knowledge and data, but you also do the whole spectrum of watchmaking. You guys are not watch snobs. You do low end to high end, horology, quartz, sexy plexi, plastic, G-Shocks, swatches, even Philip Plein, which we're going to discuss on aBlogtoWatch Weekly. But,
good.
Which I am also honored to join once in a while. So it shows how democratic aBlogtoWatch is, and that shows that you are indeed a master handler because you are not snooty.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Every time, again, that's true, and I've heard that as a compliment many, many times, and so I figure I'm doing something wrong or right. But here's the funny part. I just assume that's the case. The fact that everyone only wants to focus on one small segment or only thinks that above a certain price point is worthy, that's what confuses me. Because there's no reason why you should feel that way. There's no reason why an expensive watch brand should be threatened by a less expensive watch brand. Or if somebody is, buying a $5,000 watch, there's no way they'd want to know it goes into a $500 watch or a $500,000 watch. When you're interested in the topic, you like knowing about it all, whether or not you can afford it. And so the fact that people like to segment so much, for me, was a strange thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it. Like, people are like, I only get vintage. I'm like, why? Why would you limit yourself? So weird.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% because the high end usually doesn't want to be portrayed in between the lower segments.
Like you can't, like they don't want you to know that you could buy a watch for under $1,000. Like the secret's out, guys.
No, but that creates perspective and relevance and relativity about where you are positioned. That's why you are horology, and vice versa. The lower ends want to dream. Everybody as a kid almost had a Ferrari poster above their beds. Doesn't mean they want to buy it, but daydreaming is also a joy. And that's why Formula One is so successful. And that's the beauty and the correlation between the two. And it's the whole watch industry. We're an ecosystem. So yeah, I agree with you 100%.
I mean, and the thing is this, and you know this, when you handle a watch that is much more expensive, if they know what they're doing, it doesn't feel anything like the cheaper one. It's not that the cheaper one's bad, but there's a very real tactile sensation to a much higher end watch. So there is a real spectrum. It's not just divided by price and snootiness. It's in the outcome. And if you know what you're looking at, you can see it very easily. So I have never understood why the brands are so self-conscious about only wanting to be thought of as a certain type of brand. You remember these weird names? They have the bridge to luxury and all this weird stuff. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like, stop it.
Yeah, I agree.
The bridge to luxury. Who comes up with that stuff? Yeah. It's not luxury, but it's on the way there.
Yeah, you're on the mainland and you're allowed to come to the island.
You remember Basel World, how it used to be segmented in these very strange categories? Like the positioning of the whole show is this weird political game of how cool of a brand you are. And it was somewhat related to price, but not entirely about price, right? Yeah. Like, can you explain the politics of Basel World brand positioning? That's a hard thing, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. But that was 103 years of political games.
Yeah. And it made sense when you're there, but to the outside world, now that it's dead, trying to explain, like, what does it mean to have been a Hall 1 brand? Like, that's just a strange, abstract concept.
I am Hall 1.1. And the bridge to luxury was the independence. Remember, you go up to 5.
Oh, the bridge? Maybe Hall 2.2. You remember 2.2?
2.2.
Not 2.1, but 2.2. Yeah.
But honestly, Ariel, do you miss Basel World?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Me
Absolutely.
too. Everybody spoke about the sausages. I never ate them, so I don't miss them.
I never had one either. Everyone stopped talking. It was like you couldn't walk a block away to eat something else.
Yeah.
Like you had to stand in the long line at the street vendor, of which there's very few in Europe for good reason.
Yeah.
To buy something that people actually walk away from in the United States, when there was plenty of good overpriced food in a brick and mortar building just down the street.
Exactly. I always, my buddy Phil Toledano in New York, he always talks about the sausage fest. I said, yeah, well, if you don't eat the sausages, there is no sausage fest. So you don't need to
you can avoid that. But you remember when you left, especially at the end of the day, there was this thick density, like a herd of men. They were a combination of tired and cold and confused, right?
Yeah.
And you just knew you had to get through them. Don't get stuck in this weird herd of confused men. Push through them, and then it just opens up to emptiness. You're like, what are they all doing? Because they're all confused and don't know what to do. All they prepared for was coming to the show. They don't know where they're staying. They're staying in a different country, probably, right? Just avoid
France,
those
Germany.
guys. Yeah.
But I do miss it because now we're running around like headless chickens in Geneva and these small shows in Switzerland or locally, and it's all scattered. So you always miss when you lose something. So,
well, what I think is funny now is that all these other shows have popped up to replace it.
Yeah.
But the problem is these brands never have enough staff. So one of two things happens. Either they go to all the shows and never end up making any watches or business decisions. They're just traveling and having meetings all day long. Or they just choose one and then boom, they're like in one country doing well and that's it.
Yeah. And now that we're talking about Basel World, what recently dawned on me, how important you guys became. Because back in the days, the watch world launched everything during Basel World. You needed to feed off a year off of that content. But now they are diluted. They all have their own release schedule. So for me as a professional and a collector, the watch media became uber important because, this FOMO game of, hey, there's another drop. Like, oh, shit, I need to be online all the time to not miss out, this FOMO game. So in that sense, they rely more on you guys.
Yeah, but look, they're also trying to play their own game. I mean, this is how the luxury industry operates. I don't want to try too many generalizations, but they always want to do things themselves. Having control is super, super big deal to them, right? So if they see something that they like in terms of media, their first instinct is curiosity. Ooh, let's see what this is all about. Let's figure this out. If it does well for them, this was funny. Rather than saying, let's invest more into it with that media partner, they're like, let's try to do it ourselves. And that's sort of really screwed up psychology because I guess in the sense from an investor mentality, I get what they're trying to do, but they can't recreate every business, okay? Stay with what you're good at. So rather than say this media company's advertising worked well for us, let's do more, they're like, well, we'll just have our own media now, right? Which again, it's so dumb if you think about it, but that's what they do. Then they'll run that media for 5 or 6 years, lose money, and it doesn't get a lot of performance. And they're like, maybe we shouldn't do it. Maybe we should go back to that one media, if that media company's still around or affordable, right? That's what is going to happen. It's become either too expensive for them or it's going to have died because no one supported them.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be like, yeah, we liked what you did. We tried it ourselves. We weren't able to do it very well. Can we still do that thing with you, but for rock bottom rates? And I've just summed up about, 8 years or so of marketing decision making at a brand. It's just, this goes through this process. They always try to do it themselves because they think they can get done cheaper. Maybe it has to do with trust. Maybe they think that everyone is overcharging them. I guess there's some of that out there, but that's definitely not always the case. So with online, it's been the same thing. Yes, they invest in online advertising, but only after they realize they have to. They always try to do it themselves. And as you said, do their own releases, their drops, or connect to people and tell storytelling. And it's all become junk. It's all become just stuffed full of watch commercials on social media. Very little of it is interesting. It's all the same BS. And once again, you're back to where's the media to help sort it all out? So only now are some of these brands slowly realizing that their own efforts to do it, are abysmally poor in terms of either ROI or efficiency. They just always spend too much for too little. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, media. Yeah, that would be nice. And they look around, and even when they just invite media to their events, they realize 50% of our seats need to go to influencers now, opinion mercenaries, in other words, because all the other media died. And that's the funny thing to me. The funny thing is that now I hear from PR people that the clients, the brands, are confused that there aren't enough media to go to their events and dinners. What do you mean no one's going to come to our dinner? There's not 50 people there. Well, no one's left. No one's left, and you don't have any stories anyways. This is just you're just trying to sell a variation on something. What do you expect? And I don't know how the brands are, digesting this reality and this information, but they're doing something, right? So I don't know. What do you see from your perspective?
Let's talk maybe about the end of last year, and now we're into 2025 now. So I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of confusion, lack of strategy. Obviously, the world was on fire last year, and still things are up in the air.
Does lack of strategy mean we don't know who to copy or follow? Is that what that means?
If that's your strategy.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to clarify.
Yeah, because if there is I call it a sheep mentality, herd mentality, then if
you mean no creativity, no risk mentality?
There is very much lack. There's a big lack.
We're the creative industry, which requires risk, yet nobody wants to take it.
I agree. But let's shed a light on positive things. I was very happy that a lot of independents got the limelight they deserve. Micro brands got a lot of traction. So I think that's a positive trend in the watchmaking industry, that it's not the big boys. And we don't have a term, like in the tech industry, like the Magnificent Seven in the US tech scene. We need to create that for the watches. We always talk about the Holy Trinity all the time, which is a sliding scale because everybody puts somebody else in the Holy Trinity. But you need to coin that, Ariel. That's a free article for you. Here is a hint from me. We need to create more nicknames. Anyway, so the top 30 or whatever, whomever are in the
our versions of blue chips.
Yes, we need to create that. Anyways, so that was a positive trend.
Call it the ACE Index.
The ACE Index, yeah. Well, but that's the thing. I would have never done that because ACE is not objective. We're a retailer. We're there to sell. We only sell what we have. So I would do it under another umbrella. I try to create Chinese walls, let's say, in between, not smoke and mirrors. But so, but again, it's I myself have that difficulty because I truly try to whatever vertical I'm in. So in Red Bar, I don't blend all the stuff. With the Real Time Show, I don't blend the stuff. But that begs the question: is it really objective or not? And should I do it or not? And talking about creativity. As a watch nerd, every watch nerd dreams of designing his or her own watch. So I had that dream come true about 7-8 years ago. Actually, the watch behind me, that was the first ever collab we worked on with Rob Nuts. That's where our brotherhood started. So that also begs the question, should I do more collabs or no? I've designed now over 26 watches. And
that's great.
And that is great, and it's fun, and it's creative, and it's great to work with these brands. And obviously, my brother and I for years dreamt about doing our own watch brand. But then you come at the crossroads: do you do the boring, lack of creativity, vintage-inspired retro stuff, or do you venture out and do something super modern? I'm talking about Space One, Toledano and Chan, colloquiums kind of stuff. And
honestly, I hate to cut to the chase, but I think you're better off not being limited by what you can make, because you're too creative. You like watches too much to be limited by just whatever your own brand can make. The fact that you can sell stuff and create stuff that's relatively wide variety, like, don't give that up.
Thank you. Meaning, see, you're so philosophical. Is this is early morning for me, so I just had my first coffee. Meaning, stay on the collab side of things.
If you run your own brand, yes, you'd be successful.
I'm tied in.
But you'd be bored. Because you wouldn't be able to make the variety of models, the variety of price points, the variety of things, because it's too much for consumers. Consumers need to be slowly educated. This is what my brand is. This is what my brand isn't. This is what my brand makes. This is what to expect from my brand. And the moment you do something too unexpected, you confuse consumers, right? Consumers are not really as dynamic as brand people make them out to be. Consumers like a brand for something. It's very difficult to evolve with a brand's kind of like, restlessness. Consumers don't like that. You'd be too restless.
Yeah, I am restless by nature. And it's funny that you say so, because I super admire both Romaric Andre Second and William Messina, which I'm proud to call my personal friends. But I agree with you. That's indeed the top of creativity, because they can dance on different parties or eat from different plates and do low end to high end, which is very interesting.
The question is, will any of these guys, any of these outfits that are these, we'll call them creative directors, will they ever be able to get out of the curse of only being able to promote their own egos? Because I think the only way to scale this is to have different people do designs, have different types of watches, different price points, which means that that person that started it can't do all of them. But most of the time that we see that there's a collaborator that does these types of things, there's one dominating creative personality that wants to have control. So, my understanding is that the sort of Banksy kind of thing, there's a bunch of people there. It's not just like one individual, right? There's a lot of creative talent there, which means they're able to scale and do something very impressive. I haven't seen that really in the watch space. Maybe there's a little bit, maybe artisans, de Genève or some of those guys. I'm not really sure. There's more than one creative mind there. But that's a very niche example. So there are these great minds that are adding talent and creativity into the watch space and really making what us collectors like and also lay people. But I think sometimes there's too much tripping over the fact that people are afraid to promote anyone other than themselves, or they don't know how to. And so it limits the scale as well as the relevance and how much these types of products can penetrate to wider audiences. You know what I mean?
I know very much what you mean, and it's very interesting. What dawns on me, what I don't like in the Swiss industry, they often use guns for hire. What do I mean by that? Back in the days, the big brands would use Gerald Genta, which was interesting. He would just sell his pre-drawn sketches to the brands. But that's a different world. He would go around all the Swiss brands and offer the ready-made designs. He wouldn't even design up on demand. Often they would hide who the gun for hire is. So what I love, just to give an example, I had the honor to work twice with Cédric Bellon, and he's a fantastic gentleman, gentle soul, and fantastic designer, very modest, always in the limelight, but he worked for the biggest brands. Somebody who's now slowly being pushed into the limelight. He's not putting himself in the limelight, but he pushes Adrian Buchman.
Yeah, he's great.
He got traction with the Antarctique by Chapek, got backlash with the 12 for Christopher Ward. I know. Yeah, iKeyPod now, indeed, very well. Yeah.
The Horopod? No, so he did the Horopod for them?
Yeah, very cool watch. And actually...
Another bracelet watch, he's a little bit of a trend there. Yeah.
And I think he did a tremendous job. And CL Cole, the owner of iKeyPod today, put him in on a pedestal. So that's interesting. But the brands usually want to hide who helps them. So I don't know. They act as if creativity is given to them by divine insights or something. But I would find it fantastic if there was a collective of designers or a syndicate or something. So something that we give a lot of attention to designers on the Real Time Show. And I had actually Brainwave 2 years ago that I wanted to do a symposium in Switzerland, in the heart of it, with just designers. Because when I talk to them, they're actually hidden off, either by will or simply because the brands are shunning them. They don't know each other. The designers all don't know each other that well. They don't communicate, they don't talk. But imagine if they all would interact with each other, what creativity is created. And what comes to mind is these artists groups like The Style in the 20s, because this watch is inspired by The Style, so that's what I'm thinking of. We're working on a project now that will launch soon in 25. So this year is we're bridging avant-gardism with Bauhaus, with The Style. So you see, art unites, creativity unites people, and it's over the centuries even, not even years or decades. It's interesting that you mentioned Banksy. It's for sure that he has a huge team. Think of Damien Hirst. He has an army of artists creating stuff for him, and he just signs. But we know at the big brands, right, that they have whole teams. I mean, somebody I love is Christian Knoop at IWC. He has a whole team, and I've interviewed him several times over the last decade even. I think he's over there for a decade already. That what you said to me just now was interesting. I asked him the same. I said, don't you find it a huge burden? You need to keep on tweaking the icons, right? The big pilot, the pilots, the Portugueser. How far can you go? And when is enough enough? Sometimes you should just stop maybe because... and I said, don't you want to design something completely new, like break the mold?
But that's not why Richemont invested in those companies.
No.
Richemont invested in a timeless brand image that can be packaged and resold again and again and again. That's what they bought.
Yeah.
They didn't buy a creative company that had someone that was inventing new stuff, at least not very often.
Yeah.
They bought what they thought was a package deal, a history that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and could be used to inspire a bunch of products that could be sold over and over again. I don't think that's the best plan overall, but can't we agree that's more or less what they were investing in the brands they bought?
Very well summarized, and that's why I love your analytical view and helicopter view of things. Now, since we're jamming and philosophizing here, I would love to hear what you think of, I have to pronounce it well, Albus-Horn. So it's the imaginative vintage style. So these guys made up watches.
You mean
daydreaming? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So he's been on the show.
Yeah. So what do you think of that? It blew my mind. I'm like, I always say to every producer that produces Type 20 watches, I said, guys, why don't you produce Type 22? So you had the French Air Force make mil spec for a Type 20. Type 21 was done, and then everything stopped. I said, why don't you dream up Type 22 and 23?
So to recap for anyone that doesn't know, so basically what Sebastian did, and there's a whole episode where we talk about this on Superlative for Albus-Horn, but he made a fake vintage brand. He didn't try to pretend it was vintage. He didn't try to buy an old name. He'd actually done that before with Angelus, basically. He basically said, this is we'll call it historical fiction. It looks as though it was designed, it would have existed in that time. And he's designed this whole brand around it. Albus-Horn, and there's going to be various types. There was this already a few watches that came out so far. The most recent was this, pilot's watch. What I admire about this is how transparent and direct he is about it. There's no presumption that this is, history. It's made up, but it's for entertainment purposes, and that's what these watches are. They're entertainment. We do it for fun. I think it's very highbrow. The question is there enough of an audience out there that's highbrow enough to appreciate this subtle exercise in taste and humor? Right?
Yeah.
The right types of guys will do the same type of smile you're doing right now, which is sort of this approving, that's cool, only guys like us know about this. But if you're not around enough folks like that to appreciate it, a purchase like that can be very lonely because you're like, someone please understand this. I don't know that I could sit down someone that wasn't into watches and even in 10 or 15 minutes allow them appreciate why at, about $4,000, this is a great deal. Like, that's a hard thing to do, right? That's that's confusing to explain the nuances. But I love that this hobby attracts that level of creative plus engineering mindset together, because that's really what you have in what he's doing. He's a true passionate person in the field who's an extreme nerd on multiple levels in this in a great way. And it takes all of his skills together to put together something like this, even just to produce it at that price point. Yeah. So,
which is a lot of proprietary stuff that he does. So that's interesting. So
so you're buying the man's effort and his own zeal. And I think that's what it is with a lot of these watches, is that it wasn't for one or maybe a small group of crazy passionate people, there never would have been enough energy to even get this crazy project made, because it doesn't make sense on paper unless these, again, one to maybe small team of 3 or 4 people agree this is awesome. This stuff doesn't get made. And again, if you can afford it, what a wonderful piece of human effort to buy and that you can wear.
Yeah, and taking it from there, which you put it actually lovely in a lovely summary, is he's basically, we talked about a bridge to luxury. He's filling the gap between new designs and old a bit. And I think he will inspire the Breguets and the Breitlings of this world and whomever makes watches already for 80 years and milking that cow to push them further. I want Breguet to make Type 22. I want Eren to make Type 20. I'm actually pushing Tom very hard because I had the honor to work on Type 20 with him because I love that watch. So I said, why don't you? I mean, what stops you? So I think Albus Horn will inspire, motivate these brands to push further.
Maybe. I understand the sort of hyper cold, rational business person perspective behind a lot of the conservatism, because we do represent a minority. Really what the brands are trying to do is make pretty watches that look cool, make people feel good. And the reality is you can add a pretty weird story about success to an ugly design or whatever design. Brands understand that, and they feel that we could put whatever watch on the wrist of a celebrity, but if that celebrity is popular enough, people will want that they're wearing, even if it's not good looking. And so there's this weird struggle between, and again, we have this in the car industry. Do I put my effort into making a good car, or do I put my effort into having a good ad campaign? Because maybe I don't need both, right? And we have that very much mentality in the watch industry. There's very few people, after they made the amazing watch, are like, and now it needs an amazing campaign. Usually it's like, okay, we don't have a great watch. Do we need to put advertising behind it? Okay. But they don't really understand that you need to do both of those things well. They feel like it's sort of one or the other.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah, I know. It's like what to say about it. So collaborations and things like that, you're gonna continue to proceed with these. You said, what is it, 24 or something, more than 24 you've done at this point. Where does the business model go for you? I mean, could you do just these? Do you need to do more than that?
I do need to do more than that because they were passion projects, just a cherry on the cake because we love to. What we always have done is we create watches that we think consumers want. They always stay within the bandwidth of the brand's DNA. And we make them limited enough that it's fun, but doesn't need to be a cow that's being milked all the time. So it's not an Omega limited edition that used to be made 10,007 pieces. So always enough to satisfy need. We're honored that we always get still requests for old collabs. So that's a good thing. And they're mental exercises, creative exercises. Out of respect for the consumers, we always price them at the same price point as a regular model. So we always hand in margin. We lose margin on that. And that's out of respect to fellow watch nerds. Could it be a business like Second or Messina Lab? I think that there is a little collab bubble bursting or bursted. Although I never played that game because I'm not playing the FOMO game. I don't want it to sell out in a few seconds. I want consumers to think about it. Hey, it's out there. You don't need to pull the trigger within the next amount of seconds. So I never played that game. Oh, it's sold out within seconds, minutes, or hours.
And that is a game. Anyone that plays
it's
that,
a game.
playing a game.
No, it's a game. It's a game. And I don't like to play games. And we evolved that model by putting your money where your mouth is. One of our recent collabs was with Erin. That's the first Ace collab that's not a limited. It went into the permanent collection of Erin. And that's
if you're an American, it's Air Rain.
Air Rain. The rain comes from the air. No, it's a difficult word.
Just helping people that aren't familiar with the pronunciation.
It's a difficult word name. So so you need to remember air and rain, and then deduct one R. But it's a historical name. So Air Rain. And just remember type 20. And Ace resonates with everyone. And
they do a good job. There's a lot of brands that do that. I have one of the standard pieces. It is a cool watch. You did the manually wound movement?
Yeah, we did the ATM, so the highest level of Sellita flybacks. So Tom, the owner, who revived basically both Air, Rain, and Le Bois & Co. Le Boss. He's doing a fantastic job. He's a watch nerd. He has integrity. He's modest, doesn't have an ego, and he's driven by sheer passion. So that's fantastic. He's scaling the business now, and you see
just
that a lot
boil it down to nice guy, good watches.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. They're very good quality, which I think is important. They're not cheap, but again, they're not cheap to make at all. They really put a lot of effort into there. And they got that handsome classic look. You know, like that you want, there's that sort of very handsome kind of style that comes with certain older sports watches. He captures that so well in the stuff he does between the Le Bois and the Era. This is my opinion. Obviously, you like it as well, but I just wanted to say, for me, that's where he really stands out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And maybe to circle back to design is what's interesting. With these historic watches, he did technically not need any designer, and definitely not a star watch designers. But Tom does everything at the best he can. So he reached out to Mathieu Allègre, the guy that revived the casquette watches.
For Gerard Perregaux?
No, sorry. His own, the 3K casquette watch. I lost the brand name.
Oh, the Amida.
Amida, yeah.
Amida.
Yeah. So he's now stepping into the limelight. But using an iconic watch, you don't need a star designer, but he literally wants to do the best he can. So yeah.
Every watch needs a star designer.
Definitely.
Everyone.
Every watch needs a star wearer. Somebody to wear it. Those are the real stars. The people that buy the watch.
Different story there. They need both.
Those are the stars. So, in Dutch we have a saying that's translated to English. A beautiful watch is a sold watch. Who is everyone to dictate what's beautiful? It's the market that decides. And if a wearer bought it, he or she thinks it's beautiful.
So that's basically a variation on the customer is always right. If they like it, it's an amazing watch.
Exactly. So the market dictates. Anyway, but we're deviating. This is a fun chat, by the way. We're going all over, and I hope our listeners are enjoying
That's what you
this.
like.
That's what I like, definitely. I don't like scripted stuff. So we went off the beaten track, and I know you like to trek, so I blame you. You like to hike and trek. We were on the subject of collabs.
Yeah.
We are going to continue them because we feel we have something to add. If they don't sell out immediately, we don't care, even if it takes long. We're always very honored also when media picks up the articles. Obviously, not every media outlet picks up every watch. And it's interesting to see that some models resonate with other journalists than other, and on different designs and topics. So that's interesting to see. Sales literally go worldwide. I'm wearing this Dutch Vanderklauw.
Very cool.
We did something cool as well. We kind of made it customizable. You can choose calendar in Dutch or English because it's a Dutch brand.
Okay.
So we knew collectors wanted that. You can choose your own number and choose strap. So it's semi-customizable. I thought if sales would be 50-50. 95% chooses a Dutch calendar, even in Asia, the US, Latin America. So then you see it resonates with collectors. So that's interesting to see.
You know what that means? That means they have way too many calendars in their collection already. And they're like, oh God, anything different.
Could be. Or they read aBlogtoWatch and they understand that it's cool that when it's produced in a particular region or area to go native. So it all depends. It's also about education, or because they knew the most wanted day dates or the IWC Fliegers are the ones with the different languages. Those calendars are the most wanted.
Hi, I'm Ariel Adams from aBlogtoWatch. I'd like to tell you about Bezel, the modern app for buying and selling authenticated high-end watches. Bezel isn't like other platforms. Bezel was designed exclusively for today's timepiece collectors and enthusiasts, offering choice, convenience, safety, and service. In addition to personally authenticating each timepiece sold on the marketplace, Bezel also offers a personal concierge service to walk you through any part of the watch buying or selecting process. Want something not currently listed on Bezel? Their concierge service is happy to seek one out for you. Buying and selling a watch can be scary as well as challenging, especially with all the options out there today. Bezel uses a modern, intuitive interface to deliver a class-leading technology experience that makes it simple and fun to search through available watches or list one you currently want to sell. Try Bezel today and discover what others like you are already excited about. Get the Bezel app or use the getbezel.com website. That's GETBEZEL.com. Thanks. Now, here's a question. You have watches like the Vanderklauw, which is more higher end, around $10,000. Yeah. You've also done limited editions closer to $1,000. Do you find that these are selling to the same group of people, or is Ace, diverse enough and been around long enough that, there's obviously different types of people. Like the people buying the Vanderklauw are a very different classification of buyer than the people buying a Nevada or something like that.
Good question. Different people, and we want to cater to different people.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Obviously, we have a hardcore, I call them the Ace fam, that pick up almost everything we produce. But we definitely want to stretch our mind and our creativity and cater to different people. Obviously, the iCapod we did was for those that are into art. The Nevada Grenchen is a more democratic price point. So we've done already 3 collabs with them, with the 4th coming. And that's also to a younger demographic, right? That for them, 1,000 is a lot of money, rightfully so. With Nomos, you have total different crowds that buy them. And we have a lot of love from Nomos because this year they honored us an 7th or 8th collab to celebrate our 50th anniversary. So we're doing a duo launch. And with them, we did different themes, right? I mean, we did the art piece behind me. That was the first one ever. We've done a world timer, which is for them more high-end. Goes to the more tech-savvy watch nerds. If I spotted well, we didn't do a wrist check because we dove in right immediately. The watch you're wearing, which I'm very humbled that you have one, so thank you for that. That one was very interesting. So for the regular Frederic Constant buyer, that's very heavy because that's 4+K, manufacturer world timer. I pitched to Niels Eggeding, the CEO, who's my buddy. I said, dude, I'm going to get traction on the watch community because they think this is going to be cheap, lower end. For our listeners that don't watch the video, I'm doing air brackets. So, and that happened. So the hardcore collectors, suddenly FC was on their radar. They're like, hey, that's actually a lot of bang for your buck. So it's all relative. So that was interesting. Thinking out loud. Obviously, we did a lot of LCAs. We did the diversity stuff. So we did different languages. So
you're reaching a very broad group of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I want to sort of ask the question that I think I know the answer to, but the industry has a lot of challenges. But what I always say to them when they get depressed and they need some therapy is I remind them that there's more watch buyers in the world today than there should be. Like a lot of things that they never could have controlled, like so many watches on celebrities' wrists and in social media and the news over the last 10 years, they didn't control that or could have predicted that. That's gone a long way in getting people to be aware of watches. Just the other day, I think I was in Uber or something like that. Someone was talking about watches, and the thing they said is, and on social media for years, I've been seeing blingy watches being shown off on the wrists of celebrities. Like, watch brands didn't really, make that happen. That was sort of a happy accident. So now there's this huge amount of people out there. So I guess the question I'm getting to is, do you feel that the pool of people in the world, doesn't matter how much they can buy, but the pool of people in the world that like watches is higher than you would have expected 10 years ago, would have existed today?
Of course. It's an antithesis, because I actually had this discussion with my dad recently. He's like, yeah, Alon, you predicted what smartwatches would do to the watch industry. So it was twofold. A, it killed off a lot of sales for the volume brands, talking about the Faso group brands in this world and etc. So that pushed them to either combat on a smart watch level or go super classic and reinvent the classics. Like Timex does a great job, bring back classic watches and stuff. And I said it's a good thing because it teaches people that don't wear watches to put something on their wrists. So I call it wrist real estate. So Apple takes the majority, then Samsung, but it also educates them. And what I see now is it's not even millennials, it's Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up, is when they're turning 18, graduating high school, first job after college, they'll go for uber simplistic. And that's where Nomos gets a lot of traction. Frederic Constant, for example, takes a lot of market share. Tissot's of this world, if they want to integrate bracelet, look at the PRX. It's the watch nerds think they're buying a cheap integrate bracelet, but Gen Z likes the 70s vibes, where millennials like the 80s vibes. Everything is cyclical in design and retro and trends. So it's in cycles of about 30 years, I always say. So, and that also is grassroots growth, let alone the hype beasts that all want blingy. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about the Piaget Polo 79 that are being bought and hyped, or the Vacheron 222s. And we didn't even talk about the Cubitus, but that's the high-end level of creating traction that they think they need to wear an obsolete item, right? I mean, watches are obsolete. I've seen so many social media videos of celebrities that are not famous to me, but I'm an ignorant idiot, that they don't even set the time on their gold day dates and I don't know what. So
much of it is embarrassing, but it's happening and it's out there. Yeah. And it's not, much of it isn't really watch brands being responsible for it, right? It isn't their own marketing. This isn't stuff they're the recipient of. That's why I call it a happy accident, right? Because yes, it's great for the industry. They didn't create it. A lot of it is silly and embarrassing, but it's not, they're doing watches. It could be shoes, it could be clothing, it could be cars. Of course, they do all that stuff as well. But finally, our strange little hobby is approaching a true level of mainstream. And I know that when you and I got into the hobby, it was not mainstream. This was a esoteric hobby. This would have been like collecting little miniature whatever thing. There was, it was like, am I the only guy in town that likes this? Oftentimes, yes, you are, sir, the only guy in town. There's another watch lover, 200 miles away. Maybe you can find him on the internet. But now it's a real mainstream hobby. And that that's something that makes me feel positive about the current longevity. There's a lot of other issues that the industry is going to have, but I feel that as long as we're alive, this is going to be a real hobby that people care about. I have confidence in that.
I do, but I see also big hurdles on the road. And if you don't avoid them, you're going to slash your tires. And two major things are, if the watch industry, the producers, so on the top of the vertical, don't invest downstream into the ecosystem, including watch media, which is education, and only go on the influencer hype beast kind of things that they pump a lot of money to, that is thin as air and it vaporizes in seconds, education leads to wanting and buying. So if they don't sponsor the watch media, they have an issue. And B, if society doesn't invest in schools for kids to read analog time, so I mean round versus just vertical, so digital, the mechanical watch business will die. They'll have a future as the same as pocket watches today. So that's a warning I always put out there. I'm like, if I was the Swatch Group or the Hayek family, I would literally produce over 1 billion wall clocks for $1, dollar in Asia, where they produce a lot, which they...
You know what I'm thinking? I had a horrible thought. So obviously your standard Swatch is kind of loud, right? If they made like a wall clock version, could you imagine how loud it would be in the room? So loud.
You remember the maxi swatches? I used to have them in my room as a kid.
Yeah. Were they loud?
Whoa.
Oh God.
Dude.
So they actually made those. Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
The thing is, I love the design of those things. I can't wear them because they tick so loud.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I wear them for a day, and then I also bought the System 51, so those are loud as well. And
then someone from Swatch, their counter is, yeah, but some people like that. I'm like, not enough people like that.
Nah, it's a side effect. It did. I recently strapped on a Swatch again. It does bring back fond memories, but yeah, as a kid, I had to put it out of my room.
So once again, Swatch, I love you, and I've said this in other shows. The innovation we want to see from Swatch is the Swatch Silent. Just make it silent. You can do it. Silence is luxury. We know that. Swatch Silent.
Stealth. Swatch Stealth.
Okay, call it that. A little creepier sounding, but okay.
Ariel for design, guys. He has great ideas. He'll do it. He'll do it also in a stealth way. You don't need to mention his name. He'll do it. Don't worry about it.
Oh, great. More things I won't get credit for. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the hurdles that I think. You shared your hurdles, which I agree with, absolutely. The things I'm concerned about are twofold. The first is related to what you said about manpower. And the problem is that most of the watch brands who do business in a foreign country see it as more of an imperialistic venture. We're going to go there and we're going to spend as little money as possible to make as much money as possible that we're sending back to the home country. Okay? Not a good way to grow a business in a first world country like the United States or Europe. If you want to do healthy growth, you need to let those countries have employees that make it their career. And the only way you could do that is to share fairly with them and give them the incentive to dedicate their life to selling watches, marketing watches, distributing watches, whatever. So that is really what's missing. It's this idea that this is an imperialistic venture and not that we are growing a true ecosystem that has a bunch of people that even if I make less money, there's more people out there that are incentivized to build this entire industry up and boost it and sell and create performance on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So that's one issue. The other one is related to manufacturing. We still exist in a time where the watch industry of yesterday, where mechanical watches were still sort of a necessary mass-produced tool. That's a while ago now, but it's still not so long ago that entire infrastructure has dissolved. There's still factories and professionals that, in a lot of ways, are still set up to satisfy that. And that's why a lot of these low-cost mechanical watches are able to be produced. That's why a lot of these low-cost mechanical watches are able to be produced, because this infrastructure of making them has been inherited from this past generations. Eventually, that's going to be too far in history, and a lot of those companies are going to go under. The fact that these small brands have all this manufacturing capacity, in my estimate, is because the big brands that used to be the clients have gone away, and these factories, through agility, we'll call it that, have been able to pivot into doing these. But ultimately, this isn't going to be sustainable enough for people to dedicate their life to making watch parts, right? No new people are going to go into that. So I think over the next several decades, the manufacturing capacity to build as much watches will be much smaller. There'll still be a good amount of Switzerland. I think there'll be far less in places like China and much of Asia. There'll be some areas that have more of it as opposed to now, where it'll come back a little bit. But I think the overall ability to produce a watch is going to go down. So the number of independents are going to go away. So in 3 or 4 decades from now, just to be a watch brand is going to require so much more investment, so much more parts, so much more time, so much more expense, that the watches from today that are cool and well made, but were produced at a lower amount, a cost, are going to be highly celebrated. But again, we are probably going to be old men then. But that is what I see. I see the manufacturing ability of the industry to keep up with the demand and this volume, these low prices, is slowly going away. And it's already happening now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very interesting and very philosophical. And I think you're right even. And I always say to people that are long time in the collector's scene, like we are, that 1,000 used to be like this bracket between high-end and more high-end-ish and no. So Tissot and going up to Longines, etc. But today that's 2,000. But just due to inflation, forget about the ability to produce at a lower price. Also due to inflation, everything creeps up. Obviously, a lot of brands just push price increases because they can. Supply and demand game. But yeah, it's very interesting what you're saying. And maybe, I don't know if we have a bit of more time, just a final question I have for you while listening to you is, it's interesting what you said about the US, because US is the #1 export market for Switzerland the last few years, wherever Asia's been dominating since the 80s, let's say Japan and then China, Hong Kong. But so you're saying they're not investing enough in the US. Do you think there'll be more production capacities back in the US? I mean, I've been admiring Josh Shapiro for quite some time and actually hung out a lot with him last summer. So he gave me insights in what he does and where he wants to take his brand and production capacities, because I thought it was awesome that they created a collective with Ming and Fleming. So the alliance, I think they called it. So that's interesting. What do you think there'll be more production capacity in the US in the coming decades?
There is so much focus by a series of groups of people in various parts of America to return watchmaking ability in the United States. Mm-hmm. That is a big project. It involves making all the parts. Right now, the effort is to get factories that make other things like precision medical parts or whatever to commit to some of the, tiny tolerances and low volumes that watchmakers want. That's difficult. There's some small groups being set up to make certain components in America. I guess the short answer is yes, there will be more nice watches or just enthusiast watches made in America in part or in whole. Mm-hmm. Will it be a replica of what you have in Asia where there's a huge amount of manufacturing capacity? No. So there will be more of a craft movement. It'll definitely, some of it will be very high end, like Josh Shapiro stuff. A lot of it will be, I'm in the sub $2,000 or $3,000 range, even less than that. But what I've learned is that Americans like the made in America or designed in America watches. Not all of them are marketed as such, but some of the ones that are, even if it's not a full made in America story, do well. We know that Shinola got bid a little bit for some of their statements. But Timex has tried stuff with American Documents, for example, and there's been a lot of efforts to have watches made in America. So there's just the momentum pushing for that is so massive. And I talked to so many people, Alon, in different parts of America that all have this dream. And for 10 years, I probably talked to 100 super intelligent, highly motivated individuals who are setting up factories, not in the big cities, but in places like Arizona and Ohio and stuff like that. And you are going to see more watch parts and movements made in America. So there is going to be that. They're going to be a different beast than the Swiss brands. They're not going to be copycat stuff. And I think that's interesting. A lot of the stuff that was, from Asia and lower cost just kind of tried to copy the Swiss. And there will be some of that, but not too much in America. I think there's
the proof of that will be on my wrist soon because of you. I blame you for purchasing as a consumer the first American watch I bought, because Hamilton doesn't count, or Waltham that I have, is barrel hand. I've discovered Karel Bachand because of you, because of Superlative. It blew my mind. Followed him ever since, got him on our show, and these damn podcasts don't help because I thought it would satisfy my need of watch enthusiasm by talking about him. It's the opposite. I've never bought as many watches in the last 2 years, and I've actually ordered in the first batch the new.
It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
So I'm waiting for it. It's amazing. And I love the fact, I dare to say, and you need to correct me, Ariel, the US regulations for homemade, so made in the US, made in Switzerland, made in the Netherlands, the US one is the most stringent, right? I mean, it's 100%.
Oh, yeah. It's very stringent. I'm not qualified to tell you the full legal, dictate, but it's not like Swiss made where...
No.
There's a very specified amount that can be made in other places. American made really means that it is manufactured and assembled almost entirely in America. Obviously, you can get nitty gritty. Well, where does the steel come from? Blah, 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 blah. I don't know about all that.
Yeah, but even up to the jewels and stuff, it needs to be milled in the US. Because I had this discussion. So Switzerland, I think, is rubbish. 60% is not enough. With Michiel Holtinrichs, I had a full in-depth philosophical discussion. He's so modest because he did the Ornament Nouveau with his own caliber.
Okay.
That's higher than the Swiss level of produced in a country. And he doesn't dare to call it manufacture and not Dutch. I'm like, dude, by Swiss standards, this is Dutch made.
But the watch industry actually directly influenced the Swiss standards. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
Do you know that there's under 1,000 companies, it's maybe even less than that, but that actually are eligible to say Swiss made? It's not even that many companies.
Yeah. Although if you think, you mean any industry or just watch industry?
No, in Switzerland. And of companies that make things, not watches, that can be called Swiss made. It's under 1,000.
And the bar is low. It's only 60%.
Low bar.
Yeah.
Very bar low.
So
of the value, remember?
Yeah, but
of
you know why? Because it's so wildly
movement.
expensive. So they just cross the borders, France, Germany, or wherever.
All I mean is made in America is a universe different than Swiss made.
Yeah. And that's why it makes it even more special. Besides that, the barrel hand story is amazing. But indeed, I thought about Shinola because I know the Schori brothers who are Braloba who've helped out. So I had a lot of in-depth insights when they were ramping up in Detroit. So it's an awesome story.
Yeah, it is awesome. Okay, so because you asked one more question, I'll ask one more question. Then we are crazy over time, but that's okay. People enjoy it. I'm going to ask about where the pendulum is swinging. And what pendulum am I talking about? I'm talking about the pendulum at watch brands between let's sell ourselves versus let's have someone else sell for us. And this is a pendulum that moves both ways, from all the way over to let's have other people sell our stuff to all the way over to let's sell everything ourselves, and usually somewhere in the middle. The question is, where is the pendulum swinging right now in the watch industry? It was in the direction of let's sell ourselves. Mm-hmm. My suspicions are that it's moving in another direction now. What are you seeing? Where's the pendulum?
It's still swinging towards let's do ourselves. So
it's still in that direction?
Still in that direction.
Okay.
So what you've seen is for retailers, multi-brand retailers, independent retailers, it's very hard to have a healthy EBIT, ROI, call it profit, if you don't have Rolex and Patek. Now, it's no coincidence that those are independent companies and believe in multi-brand independent retail. But they've been cutting down dealers as well. And you see those retailers that lose those brands have issues. AP has gone fully mono-brand, but half of their network is done with their local partner. If you have the one gear below, so let's call it the Richemont brands and the Swatch brands. So Breguet, Omega, IWC, Panerai, Lange. Well, Lange also is going full mono-brand as well. So, and we've got hit by that pendulum as well. We lost almost all the groups besides Zenith because they opened mono-brand boutiques around the corner from us, which they forced us to open for them. And we said no. The last decade, no, all the time, because we said we're family-owned, we're independent. If it's not my brand name on the above the store door, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to work for losses. And I guess that's the crux of things. I have never heard of a mono-brand boutique making a profit. Rolex boutiques, yeah, but you don't get enough inventory for the costs you need to make. But I think it's profitable. But you're being forced to do it. So will they come back from that? I think so. I think like taxes, it's empirically proven that as soon as a citizen needs to pay more than 50% taxes, the incentive to make more money is gone, and it creates gigantic resentment. I guess that brands that swing past the 50% will come back from that for the sole reason consumers like to compare. Imagine blogs, aBlogtoWatch writing about just one brand. You want the diversity. You want something to pick. You want to compare. You want correlation. So your bandwidth. So I still think the brands that, especially that are shareholder driven and publicly listed, or groups, still think they're right because they don't think about stakeholders' value. They think about shareholders' value. So, but they'll come back from it because you'll see now consumers love the fact that Ace has a gigantic offering of independents and micro brands. But for my ROI, it's not good. And they miss the big box brands. And I see that because we offer them pre-owned. So I have a lot of comparison there.
Thanks for the answer. I think that's interesting. I try to look at both of the perspectives of the brands and the business people and the corporate types, consumers and the retailers and things like that. So I know what everyone is thinking. I guess the way I look at it is this. A company that sells things like jewelry or watches or things like that for many, many decades has more or less been set up an idea that we make this thing, we sell it in wholesale. And once we sell into wholesale, we make our profit, right? And then we know that this is entire other side of the business, which is like storing them in local areas and placing them in a nice display in a nice part of town and taking care of customers and handling if somebody wants to have a return or service and all that nonsense that like we don't really want to deal with because we're busy doing something else. We'll allow someone else to do that just for a margin on the sale of our own stuff, right? But we're already making money with the wholesale. But the funny thing is like that wholesale is no longer enough for them. They want to do everything. They're like, again, they want to go totally vertically integrated. And they're like, well, wait a minute. Why not stop there? Let's do the service and have the stores and all that, blah, 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 blah. Let's do all that stuff. And I guess from like a purely like business school standpoint, that makes sense. But in practice, I haven't seen it work one time. In practice, what I see is that other side of the business of distributing and selling and merchandising customer service requires such a different culture and is so expensive that all the money they thought they were going to make that ends up being poured into trying to do that thing that they didn't, they thought was easy to do in the first place. Yeah. And we see this thing where they always look at what everyone else does and they're like, that's easy, we can do that. Now, you tell the world how hard it is to make the watches the way you do, how hard it is to get the polish just right and have the culture just right to make these nice watches. And you live in this idea that only you can do it, yet you think you can do what everyone else can that you're terrible at.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm fundamentally confused on a practical basis. It's sort of like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Like, I want to make money on wholesale, but on everything else as well. But I want everyone else to be really excited about this industry, even though they're not making any or enough money at it like I am. How is that practical? How is that a full, as they like to say, 360-degree business plan? Tell me.
It's not. And again, as you said, the consumer's right. We have a Dutch saying that the consumer is king. They dictate. And obviously I know a lot of operators of the franchised monobrand boutiques, and I know the managers of the company subsidiaries that own the monobrand boutiques. But what's interesting also, because I run Red Bar Crew Netherlands, is these monobrand boutiques are begging us to do events with them because they need the footfall. So that's suddenly an interesting insight that I have gained also. They have lack of staff to man the opening hours. They can't get the people in, so let alone educate them. I do understand that they exist, right? I mean, those retailers that can't give enough meters in their boutiques and or stock a core selection, I understand you don't want them anymore. But I guess the pendulum has swung too far. So consumers, if you don't like monobrand boutiques, let your brands know. And if you do, let them know as well. And if your independent local hero, your multi-brand retailer does things well, let them know. And if they don't, let them know as well. Because it's all about evolution.
Do what Alon says. Alon, we're out of time. Remind everyone where they can learn more about you and Ace Jewelers on the internet.
So Ace Jewelers is just acejewelers.com. All the social media handles are at Ace Jewelers. And if you want know more about the things that I do, just Google my name. Ariel, thank you so much. And thank you to our dear listeners.
This has been the Superlative Podcast episode with Alon Ben Joseph, owner of Ace Jewelers in Amsterdam. If you are there, you definitely have to check them out, but also go to their website. Alon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel. It was a joy.